Okay. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Every week I got to deal with this. Okay. So a little bit of review because we haven't met actually for a while. So let me just go some quick review of what we had been talking about. So we exposed this final 7 years and found out where it's found. It's in the book of Daniel, and we discover he calls it that 7, but that it hasn't occurred yet. And we also said it is not known as the tribulation in Bible. So you're going to hear people say the tribulation of 7 years. That isn't a biblical way of looking at it. And I'm emphasizing that point because it's important later on that we understand that whole 7 years is not tribulation. We're going to make a distinction very soon between what is tribulation and what is not tribulation, and how important that is in understanding prophecy. So we discovered that it's not the tribulation, but that the 7 years begins with a peace agreement, most likely made by the Antichrist. That sure seems like what Daniel's saying. Again, Daniel chapter 9. So this Antichrist figure comes in. Something precedes it, which is really not made clear in Scripture. Could be a war, could be an invasion, could be anything. But a peace agreement or an agreement of some type has to be made. And that signals the beginning of the 7 years. And then we discover that it is broken in half when that Antichrist figure breaks the agreement. So what it says upon the breaking of the agreement is that he stops the ability to sacrifice in the temple, which tells us there should be a temple. So at some point a temple is built. Could be that the beginning or this agreement is made that allows the temple to be built. That's possible. I think we'll go more into that maybe today, possibly next time. So, but that agreement is broken, and then the Antichrist does what's known as the abomination of desolation, where he goes into the temple and he makes it unfit for use by doing something extremely bad, grotesque, bad. We talked about the example of Antiochus Epiphanes, who slaughtered a pig and spread its entrails throughout the temple area and rendered it unusable. So the Jews, if they wanted to use the temple, they had to go through a massive cleansing ceremony to make it usable again for them. And that's what he does. He basically insults and desecrates Judaism. So, and then we talked a little bit about what that abomination event is. Like I just said, there has to be a temple. Now, whether there is at the beginning of the 7 years, we don't know, but we do know that in the middle, there has to be a temple. So something's going to happen that causes the temple to be built. Okay. And that the Antichrist stops all sacrifice, like I said. When he does this, he declares himself to be God. So what Scripture says is that he goes into the temple and not only desecrates it, but also declares that he himself is God, which is obviously its own type of desecration, but that's not all of it. So he's going to declare to the world that he is God in the flesh. I'm fixing a error right here. Okay. And that's part of the desecration of the temple. And that, as I said, this has happened before. So we have an example in Scripture of what it could look like entering the temple, desecrating it, that type of thing. Okay. Today, we're going to get into what, honestly, in my opinion, is probably among the most interesting aspects of all of this. We're going to talk about the prophecies of Ezekiel. Last time we went through the Olivet Discourse, which is Jesus speaking on the Mount of Olives, Matthew 24, describing what's going to happen leading up to the events leading up to the abomination event, what happens after the abomination event. If you remember, we said, according to Jesus, that abomination event triggers what he calls the Great Tribulation. And that term Great Tribulation is where we get, the idea to call this the tribulation period. But Jesus says it's the Great Tribulation, worse than has ever been on planet Earth. Very, very difficult times. And when you think, like we said, about the types of tribulation that this world has seen, especially what the Jews have seen, even in semi-recent history, meaning, less than 100 years ago, murder of 6 million Jews, the constant rebirth of anti-Semitism in this world. Huge issues in Europe right now with anti-Semitism. France has got some major problems. Britain has got some problems. And of course, Germany, I guess that's to be expected. Germany has some problems, but anti-Semitism is on the rise in this world. And that's another aspect of what the Jews have had to go through. So, as you know, like I said, when you see that red key, just know that this is a key event. Okay. So we're going to, we're going to be looking at what I believe are some God-given signs, right? Signs of his coming. So I am not of the opinion that the end times are imminent and could happen at absolutely any moment. I do not believe that. I believe clearly Scripture gives us signs that it's coming, in the same way that we have signs when we're getting, driving on the road and getting toward a city. And if you think about it, you may have a sign that Los Angeles is 400 miles away, but the closer you get to Los Angeles, the closer and closer the signs get, right? And then pretty soon you have not only signs for LA, but signs for every road in LA, right? So the signs get closer together, and the signs tell us how fast things are approaching. I think we can know approximate times. I'm not gonna, be foolish and set a date and say, which has been done before, and it's just the height of foolishness to say, yeah. I can remember my very first year in Bible college, in 1988. It was the 88-89 year, and right when I entered was when I think it was Harold Camping had written a book called 88 Reasons Why Jesus Will Return in 1988. And for guys and girls in their 20s, that was pretty impactful, and a lot of people were very nervous about that. I don't think we can do that, but I think we can know approximate times. And as we go farther through this study, you'll see what I mean about approximate times. I think we can know when it's getting closer, right? We can see events approaching, and then as the closer they get, we can see them approaching closer. I think this is the gist of what Jesus calls the birth pains analogy. Just like giving birth, these signs will gain in intensity and gain in frequency. They'll get closer together and worse and worse and worse. And the birth pains analogy is a perfect analogy for that. The closer the pains get together, the sooner you know the baby's coming. And that's what we're going to see. I think some of these signs have already happened. You'll see that. Some are happening now, which I think is really exciting. But then some of them are yet for the future, and we have no idea when they're going to happen. But some of these signs are happening now, and this is where I get super excited about teaching this topic. And that's where we're going to actually be today, is talking about some of the ones that have already happened, but mainly what's happening right now in the world. Okay. We're going to create a 24-part list of the major signs and events of eschatology. So I'm going to give you events, numbers 1 through 24, and you're going to see how they fit in and how close we are to all that type of stuff. All right. Hi, Tammy, if you can hear me. So we're going to look more at the birth pains, and when the 70th week could begin. And we're going to look starting today, at the events found in the book of Ezekiel. Okay. So you're going to see in your workbooks a numbered list of events, and you'll see they're kind of surrounded in gold like that. In fact, in the middle of page 38, you see the first one. Just keep this in mind. They're not necessarily in chronological order, but they're in semi-chronological order, because there's going to be some overlap and that type of thing. So semi-chronological order. Some of them are one-time events. Others are periods of time. So when we get to the first one, you'll see exactly what I mean by that. So some of them sort of stretch over time, but some of them are just a single event. And some of them straddle the start of the 70th week. So they aren't necessarily just before or just after the start. They're both. They kind of overlap the beginning. Excuse me. Sorry, I got allergies today. Okay. The first 6 events we're going to look at all occur before the beginning of the 70th week. So we'll start with those events. We've already been discussing some of those. Okay. But those 6 events start before the beginning of the 70th week. All right. Hi, Tammy. Can you hear me? I think she can. She's probably muted.
I just muted her.
Okay. Okay. And then later on, what we're going to do at the very end of this whole project we're in the middle of, we're going to see how this all plays out, and we're going to create a virtual timeline. Again, I can't emphasize enough, this is speculative, but I'm trying as hard as I can to adhere to what Scripture plainly teaches with regards to a timeline. There are some things that are clearly before other things, and other things that we're just not quite sure where they are. So we're going to do the best we can using the events and the nature of the events, and just using logic. And some things just have to occur before other things. For instance, as I've been saying, we don't know when the temple is going to be built, but we know that at the middle of the 70th week of Daniel, that the temple is going to be misused. So there has to be a temple logically before the middle of the 70th week. That's what I mean by logical, a progression of ideas. Okay. So let's look at event number 1. And that's the rebirth of the nation of Israel. We're going to look at Ezekiel because this is very clearly taught and expressed in the book of Ezekiel, and you'll see it in just a minute. Who's that? Tammy again. There's Tammy. Okay, so this is event number 1. The nation of Israel is born. So here's what Ezekiel says. He says that in the last days of earth, the nation of Israel will be reborn after having been destroyed. And so this is where we get our in-depth Bible study of Ezekiel. This is where we begin that. So we're going to be in Ezekiel chapter 37. If you want to open your Bibles, that might be really good. I have the pertinent passages on your pages in there, surrounded by green. Okay, so you can see specifically what I'm referring to. But couldn't hurt, if you wanted to have Ezekiel open. I actually really wanted to read all of Ezekiel and 37 and all of Ezekiel 38, because those are our key central passages. But for the sake of time, I would say read them on your own after tonight, especially if you've never really read them or studied them, because you're going to need some context that I'm going to give you before you're going to understand them. They are fairly clear, but they're also, there's poetry in there, and prophetic language can be confusing and that type of thing. So let's look at Ezekiel chapter 37. All right. And what's known, if you see at the top, what's known up here as the Valley of Dry Bones prophecy. Okay. So this is event number 1, the Valley of Dry Bones prophecy. Ezekiel speaking. He says this: the hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. I will settle you in your own land. So this passage is describing some future time when Israel will have been dead, but will be brought back to life, not only back to life, but brought back to life in their own land. So something, according to the book of Ezekiel, something's going to happen that brings the Jews back to their land and brings the nation back to life. Remember, this is a valley, an entire valley of dry bones. So this is representative of the entire nation of Israel coming back. Okay, so something's going to happen. Let me blow my nose. Ew. Allergies. Okay, there we go. There we go. Off camera.
The Lord just blew the breath of life in you.
Yeah, it's the Spirit. That's how the Spirit manifests. Okay, is that making sense? So God is going to revive the dead nation of Israel and cause them to return. Oh, man. Gracious. I don't know what I'm allergic to. Okay. So that's what we're looking at right now. Okay. Let me give you a little bit of background. Okay. We're still on page 38. So there's a couple notes you can fill in. So we're looking at about 70 AD, in case you don't remember the history. After several years of rebellion by the Jews, the Romans destroyed Israel. They finally just got tired of them. So, Jesus has been gone at this point, maybe around 40 years, 35 to 40 years, right? And the Jews continue to rebel. And finally, in the year 70, they've just had it, and they absolutely destroy the nation of Israel. They tear the temple down, exactly like Jesus said would happen. They pull every single stone off. They steal everything, and they just destroy the entire nation, basically. The Jews had been dispersed after this were dispersed throughout the Roman Empire. So if you remember, the Roman Empire went at this point nearly into what's now the UK, but definitely over and toward Germany, Spain, France, and they were at this point were probably about to overcome the UK, and then as far east as what's now Turkey and that kind of area, and then down to northern Africa. So they basically just say, all right, we're done with you, and you guys leave and go your way. An interesting point that is not in your book is that the Romans decided to change the name of Israel to Palestina, which was named after the Philistines. So they said, we're not even going to call you Israel, Judah, or Israel anymore. We're going to call you Palestina now. You are a Roman land. We're done with you. And so the Palestinian people 2,000 years later are still called Palestinians as a result of the Romans changing the name of the land to Palestina. All right. So very few people are left in the land. Centuries pass. The Jews end up finally just being divided among all the nations, as you know. Majority of them are in what's now Western Europe. A lot of them in Germany, Poland, some of the areas north of there, and a lot of them in Russia, which was not really a Roman land, but as time went by, they sort of migrated and went into the Russian lands. So at this point, basically, 2,000 years later, almost, they are scattered throughout all of Europe, even into the US. So just like Ezekiel saying, they were scattered among all the nations. All right. Excuse me. Here's a little bit more of Ezekiel 37. This is what the sovereign Lord says: I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they have gone. I will gather them from all around and bring them back to their own land. I will make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel. Okay. So this did not happen right here at the time. This is written in the BC era, before Christ, before the time of Christ, when the Romans took over. But this had not happened. They had not been brought back in any substantive way, except for maybe the return from Babylon. But the language here is interesting, because he says, I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they have gone from all around, and I will bring them back to their own land. That was not a thing until after 70 AD, and what we call the diaspora, or the dispersion of the Jews into the entire world, right? So this really could not have had an immediate fulfillment. There was no immediate fulfillment of this, not even before the time of Christ. This had not been fulfilled. This has got to be a later fulfillment, what Ezekiel's saying. All right. Notice those underlined parts right there. I'll take them out of the nations, gather them from all around, and bring them back. So Lord is telling Ezekiel that in the future, he's going to draw the dispersed Jews back from all the nations to their land and into the nation of Israel, which is at the point we're talking about was still Palestine. All right. So how do we know this is a reference to an end time event? Let's look at the language, some of the language in verse 37. I want you to understand, as I said, that this is not an immediate fulfillment. This was specifically a reference to end times. Okay. Look at the language in the next couple verses. This is 24 and 25. God says to Ezekiel, my servant David will be king over them. Now, obviously, David at this point is dead. So my servant David is a prophetic foretelling of someone else who will reign in the way David reigned. And the more we study, the more we're going to understand that references to David after his actual time are references to a coming Messiah. And the Jews still hold to this. They see the coming Messiah, those who are still awaiting their Messiah in Israel. They see him as a fulfillment of the David's kingdom because of the promises made to David and the greatness of the kingdom that David created. They want the kingdom of David back. So they refer to David in a future tense as the coming Messiah. Okay. So my servant David will be king over them, and they will all have one shepherd. They will follow my laws and be careful to keep my decrees. They will live in the land I gave to my servant Jacob, the land where your ancestors lived. They and their children and their children's children will live there forever. Right? So this is clearly a future reference to some type of time in the world history when the Jews are going to be gathered back and never leave again. So again, it clearly has not been fulfilled yet. Right? All right. So he's clearly using end times language, right? Ezekiel is appealing to well-known. So when the Jews read this, they knew exactly what he was referring to. The references to David, the references to the coming kingdom, living there forever. They knew this was end times language. Yeah, as I said, the Jews would have clearly understood a reference to another King David as their Messiah, and that David had become a metaphor for the coming Messiah. Okay. I got ahead of myself, but there's some good things for you to fill in. I'll leave that for just a second.
Again, got the wrong order.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I did. Okay, ready? Oh, it's still there. So yes, as Ezekiel clearly said, they're going to live there forever. This last portion refers to the time of the millennium coming. And so if you're not familiar with the millennium, we're definitely going to be covering that, and you will know at the end of our course what the millennium is and what's involved in it. Okay. And at that point, that's going to be, the language uses that the Jews will live there forever. Right. And King David will be the Messiah, who we know to be Jesus. So this to us is a clear reference to the end of the book of Revelation, when Jesus comes back and reestablishes a kingdom where he himself personally reigns. And the Jews knew that. They didn't know that it was Jesus at the time, but they knew that a Messiah was going to do that. Okay. And we'll talk about that stuff a little bit more depth later. Okay. So let's look at the evidence for this. And I think we are on, here we go. We're on page 40 now. So from the time of the diaspora in 70 AD, the Jews have lived through the Euro-Asian continent, all throughout the whole continent. Russia, Eastern Europe, that was the highest percentage, right? I said Eastern Europe. I think I meant Western Europe here, although quite a few in Eastern Europe too. But yeah, that probably should say Western Europe. So we obviously know that Germany, Poland, those areas, Denmark, Sweden, those areas had a great number of Jews. We know that because they were gathered during World War II and killed. But Russia, which was obviously not overcome during World War II, but Russia also had problems with the Jews, and they would do something called pogroms, where they would basically go throughout the villages of Russia and kill Jews on their own. The Jews in the early 1900s were suffering pretty badly. Okay. So beginning in the late 1800s, So so 1875, 1850, that era forward. There began among the Jewish people attempts to organize together so that they could regain control of Israel, right? So things have calmed down in the late 1800s, and they start to try to gather together a plan for them to be able to re-enter Israel, right? They had grown very wealthy in Europe and were free from, all those powers that were controlling them, because the world scene had changed, the politics of the world had changed, and there were free markets being developed for the first time. The Jews were very good at taking advantage of that, and they gained a lot of wealth. So now they're gaining power and wealth, and they want to see if they can't reorganize. So this led to something called the Zionist movement in the late 1800s. So it was Jews and obviously supporters of Jews who began this process of trying to organize and support the Jewish ownership of what was Palestine or Israel. So this was a movement, a fairly new movement. And because the world was different and you didn't just go in and take the land, now you have to do it politically. This became a political movement in the late 1800s. So while Jewish support and, of course, Gentile support grew, so did, right parallel to it, so did anti-Semitism and the desire to eliminate this threat that the Jews were making. Look, they have all the money. There's a whole lot of them, and they're starting to protest in the streets saying, hey, we want our land back. This is a threat to the nations back then. So late 1800s, early 1900s, anti-Semitism is growing and growing and growing and growing. I don't know if I get into this here. Let me wait for a minute, because I'll tell you a little bit of history that'll explain why anti-Semitism is growing. So much wealth and power that a lot of nations were fearing that, oh my gosh, if the Jews leave, so does our money. They're going to bankrupt us if we leave, right? At the same time, the Ottoman Empire is still in charge of much of the Middle East. Okay, now we're going to go in depth into the Ottoman Empire later, but just keep in mind that it's an extremely long-running empire from about well, it depends on your view of when it started. It could be as early as 650, but some people might place it later, around the time of the Crusades, until the 1900s. So anywhere from about 1,000 to 1,300 years, the Ottoman Empire had ruled a great deal of Europe. This is just a view of what's known as the Levant, which was the final days of the Ottoman Empire. It was diminishing in size. And this is what it controlled in the final days, which is what is now Turkey, and then what is now Syria and Palestine, which is we know to be Israel, right in this area where my cursor is. Over here is a good portion of Jordan right here. And then the Arab Peninsula, they had controlled it, but there really isn't a whole lot in the Arab Peninsula. It's really not worth controlling. It was just largely just Bedouin, tent-dwelling people for a good deal of its history, right? So this Muslim-controlled, area, this crescent-shaped area, stretched from Turkey. Notice I spelled, this is how Turkey is now spelled. So if you see this spelling of Turkey, that's because they changed it about a year ago or so. So I think they pronounce it Turkija, something like that, but I'm not 100% sure of that. So, but Turkey's reign was all through this whole area, even into parts of Egypt. Actually, it's not really on this map. So they control, there's a little bit bigger version. They control that whole area, right? So the Jews are rising. The Ottoman Empire still controls the area, and the Jews are saying, no, we want to go in there now, right? What's going to happen, which we won't have in our book, is that the British are going to take over control of much of this away from the Ottomans. And that's going to happen in the 1910s through 1920s or so. So pretty soon the British are going to control all this, but that hasn't happened yet, right? So tensions are growing. I wrote down here 600 years. It really is questionable. They could have been in control for a 1300 years. Depends on your definition of control. So the British take over, right? And out of sympathy, because the Ottoman Empire is dying and there's going to be a void in this region here, there's going to be a power void and a people void. The British take sympathy on the Jews, and they put together what's known as the Balfour Declaration. It's a document providing support for the creation of a new nation. So this is about 1970, and this is actually a facsimile of the, I don't know if you can read it, but you can definitely read it online if you're curious. Let me see if I do. I have it. Here's a little bigger one. It's really very short. This is the sort of the beginnings of the what's the word I'm looking for? Recreation of the state of Israel right here. So let me go back one.
Dave, is that the same Rothschilds as today?
Yes. I'm going to get into the Rothschilds in just a second. It's a very interesting history. So if you can read this right here, here's the key part. His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Israel of a national home for the Jewish people. Now remember, they're taking over control, the British, and they're saying, you know what, we're going to give it to the Jews. So this is world changing, right? This is a huge issue that's coming up here. Okay. So after the end of the First World War, the Balfour Declaration at this point is kind of a go, because the West won. The Ottoman Empire is basically eliminated. You're going to discover that they're going to be wiped off the face of the earth very soon after this. All right. So again, the European nations are troubled by this. They think, oh boy, all the money is going to leave. Now they got someplace to go. They're going to take all their money. Let me go here and show you a little bit about the Rothschilds. Very interesting history, right? This is how modern banking began, by the Rothschild. Now, by the way, their name was not Rothschild. It was, I don't remember. I think actually this is their last name. You see down here, it says Patriarch Meyer Amschel Rothschild. I think his name was Meyer Amschel. He took the name Rothschild, which means red shield, because they had started a company, right? So here's a quick history of Western banking started by the Jews, right? So this wealthy family of Jews enters the banking market. This is in the 1700s or so. They create a new form of banking, right? So here's what they did. It's actually very, very smart. Up till this point, they had basically just, when people moved around and went from one place to another, they would basically carry gold with them. They'd carry their fortune with them in the form of, usually gold. What the Rothschild family did is they deposited gold at the beginning 5 nations or 5 cities: London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Naples, right? And then they conceived the idea of a promissory note. So you no longer have to carry your gold with you. You put your gold into a Rothschild bank, and they give you a note and say, this guy has 500 pieces of gold on account with us. He doesn't have to carry the gold with him. He just carries this note, which has no literal value at all, right? And then he goes to the next city, whatever nation, whatever city he's going to, and then he shows them the note and says, and they give him 500 pieces of gold from their bank. And that's how banking began, all by the Jews, all by the Rothschilds. Okay. So it's really genius. And by the way, our monetary system of dollars is based on this right here. It was the beginning of paper money as we know it today. So, a dollar bill is no value in itself. It's a promise of, well, initially $1 worth of gold, but we don't have a gold bank backing to our money anymore. But that's how banking began. So long story short, the Jews control the money, right? So they're being promised a new land, and everybody's looking at them saying, no, you're not leaving, because you're going to be taking all your money with you, and we want the money, right? So the anti-Zionist movement, especially in Germany, begins really in force, right? And then eventually Hitler and the Nazi Party, and Hitler was a staunch anti-Semite. He hated the Nazis, or the Jews, created the Nazi Party, and eventually came up with what his answer was, which was to just kill them all and take their money. So it may not have just been, I hate Jews because they're whatever reason he came up with. I don't like their face. It was more like, I want their money and I don't want them having any control of their money. And the answer is, I'm going to basically kill all of them and take all their money. And that's basically what the Nazi Party ended up doing. So as you know, at this point, 6 million Jews are displaced first and then murdered. So the initial displacement was just, we're not sure what to do with them yet, but we're going to put them in these camps and we're going to take all their money and gold, and we're going to keep it all. And then later it became, let's just kill them all, right? So then World War II has to go in to settle all this, and that's where we became involved as the Allies and went in basically and tried to save as much as we could of what was left, right? So after World War II, you have this key date right here, and then we just passed the 75th anniversary, and that was May 18th, 1948, and that's the beginning, the birth of the state of Israel. So you're seeing Matthew 37 fulfilled in this date right here, when the Jews were reinstated into their own nation, and then from that point forward began to migrate over to their land. Okay. It was, some people have thought of it as sort of a reward for what the Jews had gone through, but it had already been in play before that. So, and maybe the Balfour Declaration might have been another aspect of Hitler's impetus to destroy them, because he sees it coming that they're going to have their own land and says, oh no, we'll just destroy them instead, right? So between then and now, and this number is probably higher because I wrote this a couple years ago, between then and now, approximately 6 million Jews have returned to their homeland. So the population of Israel now, I think, is about 10 million. So a lot of that is immigration, and a lot of it is just new births. But, they went from almost no Jews. I don't have the stats here, but if memory serves me right, there were about maybe 100,000 Jews, maybe not even that many, that had sort of survived in the land and still knew that they were Jews because Islam had taken over. So some Jews didn't even know they were Jews anymore. They had been taken over by Islam and had lost their whole heritage of Judaism, or they had combined Islam and Judaism together, which is what they still discover. There's this morphing of two religions that occurred, and there are still people in Israel who sort of adhere to both religions, right?
Do you want the current population?
Yeah, please.
9.17 million.
9.17 million, right? So almost 10 million, and it grows constantly. I'll show you that today too, I think, right? So this reinstatement is a fulfillment of multiple other verses. There's some there. If you want, I don't think these are in there. So if you wanted to, yeah, these are not written down. So if you ever want to go look these up, there are more verses that talk about this reinstatement of the Jews to their land. I'll let you write those down real quick. Okay. So that is the very first of our events, which has already occurred, and that's the reinstatement or the nationalism of Israel. Israel, after 1900 years plus, becomes a nation again for the first time. Okay. So even today, there's still Jews returning. The last stat I got was about June 2020. 25,000 plus Jews from Russia took part in what's known as an aliyah, and that's a ceremonial returning to the Jewish homeland. So aliyah is what they call their ceremonial desire to return back to their land. So that 9.6 million number that Tracy said is constantly growing, not only with birth, but with Jews constantly returning to the land. Now, there are still more Jews outside of Israel than there are inside of Israel. We don't know what's going to happen with that. Some of them, I think there's about 9 or 10 million just in the US or so. I mean, there's about as many here as there are in the nation of Israel. I don't know that the land could stand. Well, they got a lot of land in the south. Israel's got an awful lot of land south of like Bethlehem, desert land that you wouldn't think is livable, but to see what they've done with Jerusalem, which was desert land and is now this lush green, land full of crops and food and industry and all kinds of stuff. So they could probably sustain another 10 million people in that nation, plus lands to the north, actually, like the Golan Heights are kind of the upper northern part. They're relatively empty up there too. So a lot of people could return to Israel. Could still happen. The advances in Israel are astonishing. They're well known for being, the forwardest thinkers in some things like medical technology and agriculture. Their technological advances have been astonishing to the world. But believe it or not,
Nuclear weapons with Oppenheimer.
What?
Nuclear weapons with Oppenheimer.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Oppenheimer was Jewish, wasn't he? I guess I never even thought about that.
And Einstein.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, shoot, a lot of the great thinkers of that era. Yeah. But hard to believe, but little tiny Israel. Now, the nation of Israel is about the size of the state of New Jersey. It's not very big at all. It's way, way smaller than California. It's probably about half the size of the Central Valley of California. Little tiny land, right? But it's the 8th most powerful country in the world. And that's not only advances in their technological advances, but that's wealth and, believe it or not, military. Their military is incredibly advanced. I think if you ever study Israel, you'll see their advances, especially in defensive warfare, are unmatched in the world. They're just amazing people. So they not only have they returned, but they've been blessed when they return. All right. So that's event number 1. I'm going to move forward into event number 2, which is that the nations surrounding Israel are going to join together against Israel, and they're going to stage themselves for war against Israel. And this is where we're going to get into Ezekiel 38. Okay. So the nations are going to begin to gather against Israel again, because remember, Israel's pretty well hated, right? But according to Ezekiel chapter 38, they're going to begin to assemble for some type of warfare or advancement against Israel. And remember, Ezekiel 37 seems to indicate that we're talking about the end times here. So a stronger chance then that chapter 38, which is a continuation of the same story, it's the same narrative continuing, right? That 38 is also about the end times, about the coming end times, right? So the Bible teaches that the final days will be preceded by specific geopolitical happenings in the Middle East, and that they're laid out in those later chapters of the book of Ezekiel. Okay, so Ezekiel chapter 38, bottom of page 41, the nations are going to assemble for an attack on Israel. So I'm going to lay out some things that are going on in the world. We have about 40 minutes. I think I can get quite a bit of it done, but there is a lot going on in this world, in fulfilling Ezekiel chapter 38. In fact, right now, Ezekiel chapter 38 is probably the one to watch, the one to read and know and watch. And I'm going to reveal some things that I believe it says to you. Okay. So you'll see in the green box toward the bottom of 41, you'll see that we're going to see what Ezekiel tells us about these final days and these nations. All right. So this is fulfillment of this second event, right? Excuse me. The Lord is speaking to Ezekiel and says, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army. Right? So Gog, what is Gog? Okay. Because he talks about Gog of the land of Magog. So what is Gog? This is a confusing term. And there isn't 100% consensus on what Gog is. All right. There definitely is in the Bible a person named Gog, but he's found way earlier. And he's found it as a descendant of Joel, and he's kind of listed as a person, but who is this this actual person Gog? Because the term Gog is also used as a title, right? So probably Gog means something like prince or king of the land of Magog. Could be a person's name. More likely it has morphed itself into just a general term that means like the leader of, right? So that's what Gog is. Magog is mentioned as a settlement that lies north of Israel. So somebody named Gog from this settlement north of Israel, he says, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, I will turn you around and put hooks in your jaw. That's God speaking. I'm going to bring you down with your armies. That's what God is saying. Okay. So in Ezekiel, this Gog of Magog most likely means something like king of the land of the north, something along those lines. I'll tell you a little bit more about this in just a second. Actually, some stuff I just learned. And it's, it's going to be a little speculative because I'll show you some maps and I'll show you what commentators have said, but also show you some other theories about it, right? They're also mentioned, by the way, again in Revelation 20, which is interesting because in Revelation 20, it's the very end after the millennium. What you'll see if you read Revelation is that Gog and Magog, this time it's called Gog and Magog, not Gog of Magog. Gog and Magog rise up again, and they go to battle against Jesus again. So it is a land of the north. It's possible, at least in this Revelation 20 passage, that it's also just a metaphor. It's possible that that's the case, but we know that there was a land, and we're going to discuss that real quick. There was a place called Magog. All right. So the Magog people settled and expanded north, somewhere around the Black Sea. That's kind of where they ended up. The land of Magog then is the north central part of modern day Turkey, and possibly the lower portions, which is Ukraine and Russia, which I spelled wrong. Right. So Ukraine and Russia around the Black Sea. I'm going to show you a map in just a second. Okay. This is sort of a side note, and you can write this down if you want, or if you want to do your own research. Gog some people say Gog is a translation of a king named Gigas or Gyges of Lydia in about the 7th century before Christ or so. So there was a guy named Gigas or Gyges. I don't know how you pronounce that. Lydia was, I'll show you in just a second. Okay. So this is Turkey right here, modern day Turkey. There you see Syria. Lydia was sort of the western half of Turkey. So there was a person named Gigas who was the king of this land right here. So we just don't know for sure, right? But we're gonna theorize a little bit about who Gog of Magog is. Let me give you another theory. This is the one I told you I am kind of in the middle of studying now, but I think it's pretty strong. I think we're on page 42 now. Okay. Josephus, who was a 1st century Jewish historian and wrote the history of the Jews and history of the warfare of the Jews and that type of thing. But he was a historian, Jewish historian at the time. Okay. Here's what he said in his book, Antiquity of the Jews. says, for Gomer founded those whom the Greeks now call Galatians or Gauls, but were then called the Gomerites. Magog founded those that from him were named the Magagites, but who are by the Greeks called Scythians. So Josephus, now Scythians, we recognize this term. We know this term from history. Josephus says the Magagites are Scythians. So who are the Scythians, right? This is Scythia. Now Scythians, I'm going to give you a little bit more insight here in just a second. This is outlined in yellow is, oh, I lost some people. Outlined in yellow right here is what was known as Scythia, but keep in mind that the people were kind of nomadic. And so this probably refers to where they lived in entirety, not necessarily the vast nature of their people group. So they may have lived here for a while, then they moved here for a while, then they moved here for a while, that kind of thing, right? So they were migratory people. They lived anywhere from Eastern Europe. Now you'll notice in this part of the map right here where it says Sarmatia, this is currently Ukraine, okay? Dacia, that's like Romania or Hungary. And these are, Romania, Hungary over here. The Roman Empire sort of reached up into here, There was this other Parthian people group that were kind of what's now Iraq and Iran sort of land right there. But so that's who the Scythians were, okay? And now you'll notice basically that's Russia, okay? So Josephus says that the Magogians lived up here in what is now Russia. Russia, of course, goes way up here, right? So Russia isn't just limited by this yellow, it goes way up here. Although the livable portion is pretty much in the yellow right here. After that, it gets so cold that you really can't live up there anymore, okay? So if Magog is the Scythians, who were a nomadic people, lands included all the way from Eastern Europe to east of the Black Sea, right? East of the Black Sea and east of the Caspian Sea. Actually, that's probably what that should say. I'm going to change that. So they lived, this is the Caspian Sea right here, right? All of these lands are the Stan lands, right? So this is where, by the way, the Turks who live here are not Arabs. I don't know if you know this or not. The Turks are people who lived over in this Mongolian area who were kicked out of their land and then came over and took over Turkey later on in life. But this area over here is those Stan lands, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Turkestan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, all those Stan lands are all over here. So those also could be theoretically the Magog people. And they're relatives of this Turkish people. These are all kind of relatives to each other right here. Okay. Too bad we lost everybody because this is some good stuff. All right. So I wonder what happened.
Are they trying to get back in?
No?
No, I'm texting them and they haven't responded to me yet, so not
That's
sure
weird.
what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we
Dwayne,
could
do you
just
mind if I
pause.
wait a second and pause?
Yeah, why don't you pause for a little bit?
Yeah, let's do that. Tell me what they say, Trace.
Yeah, they're not responding.
It was Tammy and Nancy at the same time, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was it Tammy or was it David?
I don't know. I thought I heard David's voice at one point.
Yeah. Hey, Dwayne, have you used your shaper?
Yes. Yep, I cut some templates out the other day with it.
Oh,
Oh,
It's got
yeah.
this, it's got a, what do they call it? Oh, there's somebody.
Okay,
that's
Tammy's back.
Tammy. Oh,
Yeah.
and there's Nancy. Okay.
Weird that they both got kicked off at the exact same time.
We had a power
Oh, serious?
Oh, no way. You guys blinked, huh?
Yeah, everything went out.
Oh, wow.
Okay, just so you
A
know,
power
I didn't,
outage, Nancy?
Yes, I had a power outage.
yeah,
Wow.
weird.
Where are you guys?
I'm
I
in
am
the,
out here off of River Road.
oh,
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow,
Doesn't
because
happen
Tammy's
very
way,
often, so that was kind of weird.
Yeah, Tammy's a marina.
Tammy's a marina. It's weird.
Did she have a power outage too?
Yeah.
Oh, weird.
And you guys didn't.
Well, we're on Chular's
Yeah,
power grid, so we're not
Yeah.
even
Oh,
on the same.
we're right on
power-
the edge of a different power grid, so our we got kicked off at different times.
got it.
Let
So I'm
me go
back on.
Okay, very good.
Oh, I might have to. You guys aren't seeing the screen anymore, are you?
Yes, I'm seeing.
Hold
I
on.
see it.
You should back up a little bit, Dave.
Okay, here we go. Okay, you should be able to see it now. Okay, so I'm not sure where you guys, Tammy and Nancy, you dropped off, but we were talking about who are the Magog people. Did you hear us talking about Gog and Magog and that type of thing?
Yeah, but I think we got kicked off before you got to that map. That's
Okay.
two ones up.
Here we go. So that's this one. So this is what Josephus says the Magog people were. He equates them with these people group that lives way up here. Okay. So there's a little bit more involved here. So I'll keep in mind that they were migratory people. So by the way, let me go back one. So just so you know, this is modern day Turkey right here. The Black Sea here. This is the Caspian Sea here, right? And then right here where it says Sarmatia, that is current day Ukraine right there. And then this up, and then, Crimea is down. Crimea is right here, I think. And then the rest of this is Russia over to maybe, probably about where the yellow is mostly Russia, right? And then, of course, above that is also Russia. But the Scythian people were the people who lived in what is now modern day Russia, which makes for an interesting argument because when the Ukrainian-Russian war started, people were asking, is this the war of Gog and Magog? And, there was a lot of division among scholars and commentators and apologists and that type of thing, because we didn't know, right? And which caused me to do some research and study more about what's going on. So if Magog is the Scythians, which was nomadic people, all the way from Eastern Europe to Eastern Europe, which is kind of here, Hungary, Romania is kind of right here, as is Ukraine, as I said. And then all the way over to here, which I was saying is the Stan lands, which is a funny way of saying it. I'll show you a picture here. So these are all the Stan countries. Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, I think I said Pakistan, Afghanistan, right? Those are all these nations here, right here. And these people groups, the Stan people, are the same as the Turkish people groups who made their way up like this. So at the time, they were sort of surrounding the Black Sea, and then they became a migratory people in this yellow portion right here. So that's who the Magogs probably are, which makes the argument very interesting. Okay, I'm going to go over this really quickly, but this is the Scythian people's sort of movement. So they started somewhere up in here, which is now like Lower Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan. This is Russia up here, right here. And then they sort of migrate through Turkey along this landmass. There's Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine. So they're all over this landmass in these, just these first 400 years BC. And that's what Josephus is referring to. So that's the Magog people who live in that land surrounding Turkey and north into what is now Ukraine and Russia, and even, as I said, over into the Stan lands over here. Okay. So let me go to here, right? So let me go a little bit more into this. Same verse we were just looking at, but he pauses and then he says, "Set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal." So he's saying Gog, of Magog, is the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. So now we got to figure out what's Meshech and Tubal. Okay. Here's where it gets interesting and where people get confused. All right. Chief in this verse is the translation of the Hebrew word Rosh, right? So it said, it would basically, if you were to read it in Hebrew, it would say Rosh of Meshech and Tubal, or Rosh prince. I don't know the prince word. But Rosh would mean this word chief right here. So they see this word Rosh, and they say Russia, must be Russia. And we don't know that, but it is an interesting coincidence, if you want to call it that, that Rosh, because let me go back. I'm skipping around like a little bit here. Let me go to where you can see it. Russia was known as Rus and Rosh for many, many years before it became what we now call Russia. So its name for many years was some variation of Ros or Rus or Rush or Rosh, something like that. So Rush in this verse could refer to Russia. It's very possible. In other words, it's possible that Magog is Russia, right? Keeping in mind that it just means first or head. Remember that, for instance, Rosh Hashanah is the first day of the Jewish calendar, the New Year day of the calendar. So Rosh just means first, or it means the head of, or the beginning of, something like that. So, so many have basically said that it's talking about Magog and the prince of Rosh. And so people, of course, say, well, that's obviously Russia. It's not obvious, but it is possible, right? And then you get into Meshech and Tubal. Oh, America's here. Okay. So the question becomes, we're on the next page now, 43. No, I think we're at the bottom of 42.
Hi, America.
Okay. Hi, America. So we're sort of at the bottom of page 42. And we want to find out who Meshech and Tubal are, right? And this is where they're always placed on the map. So again, this circled area is Turkey. Again, Black Sea here, Caspian Sea here. Meshech and Tubal are usually placed here in one of these areas. Gomer is sort of up here. You're going to see some of these other names in just a minute right here. Another map. This is Turkey right here, right? Meshech and Tubal. Notice the differences. Meshech is here, Tubal's here. And this one, it's got it way farther east. So commentators will say Meshech and Tubal is Turkey, areas of Turkey or tribes of Turkey. But you really can't get past the similarity in those names to Moscow and Tobolsk, which are two major cities in the nation of Russia. Let me give you a map here. Okay. So some believe that Meshech is Moscow and Tubal is Tubal. So there's Moscow, right? Obviously the capital of Russia. In that area, that Scythian area would be basically this area where I'm circling right here. So and then Tobolsk is kind of the far eastern side of that. So it is possible that Magog is Russia and is referring to the far northern areas that are known as Russia now. Okay. I don't think it's entirely out of the question to say that. Most commentators will say, no, it's just Turkey. But I think it's reasonable to say that it could also be referring to Russia. Okay. A little bit more. We're doing okay on time. Next part of the verse, he says, Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them. So whoever these people are, Persia, Cush, and Put are going to be along with them, right? Also Gomer. Remember, Gomer's kind of way up here. Gomer is this land sort of up here. So Eastern Europe or possibly Russia. Gomer with its troops and Beth Tagarma from the far north. Note that, by the way, the far north. Okay. So Persia is what is now Iran. In fact, the Persians even still call themselves Iranians, or vice versa. The Iranians call themselves Persians. They call their culture Persian culture. So Persia is very clearly Iran, all right? But it was a bigger than just what's modern day Iran. You'll notice the Persian Empire stretches all the way through Turkey. So Iran, if you see me circling, would be right about here. Iraq would be right about here. That was the Persian Empire. So when scripture talks about the Persians, it's talking about these Eastern people. This is sort of the height of the Persian Empire. But back then it was at least where I'm circling here, all the way over to where India is, and Afghanistan's in there, and then all the way as far over as what's now Iraq. Right here, notice Babylon's right there, which is in Iraq. Okay, so that's who Persia is. So Persia is Iraq and Iran. Kush is now Ethiopia and parts of the Sudan. Okay, I'll show you a map in just a second. And then, by the way, you have an area down at the bottom, a map on 43, where you can kind of outline things if you want to. So Kush is now what we know as Ethiopia and parts of Sudan, including the southern parts of Egypt. Kush could be included in Eastern African states like Eritrea and Djibouti and others, right? And the Kushite language is still spoken in those areas. So here's where Kush is, right here. Kush is below Egypt on the coastal areas, the eastern coastal area of Africa. And this is the current language. They call it Cushitic language of all of this area. So south of Egypt is Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti, I think is down here. Don't laugh, Tracy. Other nations down here.
Excuses
All
to
the
say
Kushite.
that.
Tracy knows it's my favorite nation name to say, Djibouti.
I just said it twice and laughed.
Djibouti. All right. Okay, so that's Kush right there. What's Put? Put is now modern day Libya. All right. And possibly parts of Tunisia and Algeria. So northern Africa is Put. So notice I haven't included Egypt in there. Egypt is not mentioned. It is a very well-known country at this point, but they're excluded in this list in Ezekiel 38. They don't enter into whatever's going to happen here. So here's the nations again. And if you want to, on your map down there, excuse me, you can sort of circle these areas down here. But Put is over here. Turkey obviously up here. Persia would probably refer to the nations all the way over. Oops. Possibly as far, and I've got it all the way over into Israel, but maybe not that far, maybe including Jordan and Syria, definitely including Iraq and Iran. And again, like I told you, back in the day, it went all the way over to here. But even the influence of Afghanistan and Pakistan are in there. So that's Persia. Put over here, Kush down here. So these are the nations that so far have been named as and by the way, possibly Russia, as going, as assembling themselves against the nation of Israel, right? A couple more nations, Gomer, with its troops, and Beth Togarmah in the far north. Interesting far north there. Gomer is, we might be on the next page. No, we're still on 43. Gomer is the central region or eastern central region of Turkey, although some people believe it's north of that, right? And Beth Togarmah is the northeastern part of Turkey, okay? And again, in case you didn't see it, Turkey, this is how Turkey is spelled now. This is how they spell their country name now. They just changed it. Okay, so there's another map. These are just maps from old commentaries and stuff. But you'll see.
Got tired of being compared to holiday.
Yeah, you're not kidding, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's Togarmah, and there's Gomer. Again, there's Meshech and Tubal, and some of those other nations are sort of over in here. This is all, again, this is all Turkey right here. All this land is all Turkey. Okay, so Togarmah, Gomer, Tubal, Meshech are all modern day Turkey. All right, and then the far north, like I said, may refer, and I think probably likely refers to Russia, especially when you study the news and you realize that Russia is very much in league with the nations we've already mentioned. Okay, so since we've already covered, there's questions about what the far north means. Some people will say, well, they didn't know any farther north than here. That's absolutely not true, because the nations north of the Black Sea, which is right here, let me get a better map. There's the Black Sea again. These nations back then were already populated. So the far north probably does not refer to Turkey. It probably refers to north. If there's Israel, then north of Israel becomes Russia. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, the far north probably refers to Russia, and that's kind of my opinion. It's questionable, but I think it's a good analysis in my opinion. Okay. Again, Gog Magog up here into Russia, Ukraine, Tubal, Gomer. Gomer could be up here, Eastern Europe, because they might have migrated there. But at the time, they were most likely in Turkey. So Turkey obviously plays a huge central role. Okay. Going on, we're on the next page, 44. It says in future years, now let me skip down before I read the whole verse. Future years in the original language, the Hebrew language in which it's written, is the language of not an immediate future, but a very distant future. So again, you're getting reiterated this distant future, end of times scenario that's being played out. All right. So in future years, you will invade a land that is recovered from war, whose people were gathered from many nations, right? That's the Jews, to the mountains of Israel, that's Israel, which had long been desolate. They had been brought out from the nations. So this is again 38, talking about these people gathering against these nations, these Jews who were brought from the world into the land of Israel again. Okay. I know I'm moving fast, but I'm duplicating myself a lot here. Here's a real interesting one, and we're kind of in the middle of 44 here. A different turn of events. Sheba and Dedan are mentioned. Sheba and Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish. And all it says merchants of Tarshish and all of her villages. The original Hebrew says Tarshish and her young lions, but that's been translated as villages, right? They'll say to you, have you come to plunder? All right. So it appears that Sheba and Dedan, and I'll show you who those are not going to involve themselves in this gathering together against Israel. They seem to be standing in the background, just sort of observing. And their question is, have you come to plunder? As if they're not going to help and they're not going to stop. They're just sort of asking, what are you guys doing? Sort of thing. All right. They seem to be kind of, neutral, or even antagonistic to this invasion that seems to be pending here. So the question is now, who are they? Well, Sheba and Dedan make up what is now Saudi Arabia. Okay. Parts of southern Jordan. All right. I think I'll show you a map here. Southern nations of the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, Yemen, Oman, all those are all Sheba and Dedan. I'll show you a map. Sheba is the southern portion of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. And all of these nations are the ones I just said. The UAE, Oman, Bahrain, Qatar, those are all in Sheba. And Dedan is the central portion of Saudi Arabia, which at the time was really just nomadic and nobody was really there. But later, and obviously now is very much built in. So whenever this happens, this portion doesn't seem to get involved. They seem to just sort of stand off and ask what's going on and not really do anything. Right. Question about who's Tarshish. I don't think I go into depth anymore in this one. There are a lot of theories, and I'm not going to go too much into depth on who Tarshish is. All right. There's very strong evidence that it's either Spain or it's the UK. And if you want, I can explain that. But it's interesting either way. Nobody's 100% sure who Tarshish is. But it's interesting that it might be Spain or the UK because they seem so distant, but whatever the case, they are not involved in this thing that's happening against Israel, but they are aware of what's going on and sort of standing back and not getting involved in what happens. Okay. So let me do a quick summary. And where am I here on page 45? It looks like. Okay. Next week, and it looks like we're not going to get there today. Next week, I'm going to spend a lot of time showing you what's happening right now. And if I can, I'll start that today. But quick summary, all of these nations that you see here, verse 2, Gog and Magog, Meshach, all those nations, this is who they are, right? North Central Turkey, Russia, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Sudan, Western Turkey, Northeastern Turkey, Saudi Arabia is those Sheba and Dedan, Tarshish. Okay. Spain, I wrote down US, UK, Canada. So it's possible that the UK and Canada would be involved if Tarshish is the UK. Okay. Because we could be her young lions, which are referred to, her offspring. Okay. So again, sort of laid out. Here's the main people who come against Israel in the last days, according to Ezekiel 38. Turkey, Ukraine or Russia, Iran and Iraq, or Iran or Iraq, Syria, Sudan, Northeast Africa, which was the Cushite people, and Libya, okay? And then the people who stand off and don't really get involved, Saudi Arabia, the Arab states, Spain, and possibly Spain or possibly the UK/US/Canada, all right? I think this is happening right now. And if we can spend a minute, I'm going to go into that right now, okay? I think a reasonable question to ask is, if the prophecy of Ezekiel's 38 is true, right? What should we expect to see? When God says, I'm going to pull these countries together, what should we expect to see, all right? And I'm going to make a couple claims, right? Number one claim is that the nations of Ezekiel, they're creating a coalition against Israel, and number two, that some nations are going to come together in support of Israel. Now, I've kind of said that, but I'm going to prove it in just a minute. Let me start with that, okay? I'm going to give you evidence from my claims, and all of them are recent headlines. All of them are recent, obviously internet headlines, but I'm going to show you headlines. I'm going to show you the headlines. All right. Some of them may be a couple of years old, but I try to update this as often as I can. Okay. So give me a couple minutes. Let me talk about claim one, just to get you into what I'm saying. Claim number one says the nations of Turkey, Syria. I phrased this wrong back here. I shouldn't have said claim, right? Sorry. Claim number one in the middle of, in blue in the middle of your page. The nations of Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Sudan/Ethiopia / North and East Africa. That's the Cushites. All of those people are going to rally against Israel. They're going to somehow join forces against Israel. Okay. So let me give you some evidence. All right. Exhibit number one is Turkey and Libya, or put in the scripture, are forming an alliance now. This is interesting news because it was never really news before, but it's fairly recent. Okay. Here's point A, point A under that. Turkish troops in Libya are currently in Egypt. So Turkish troops, let me clarify this. Libya is in the middle of a civil war problem, right? Ever since Gaddafi died, they've had no leadership in their country. So Libya is in chaos. Turkey decided they were going to enter into the chaos to try and help the rebel forces take over. So they're stationing, Turkey is stationing troops in Egypt against Egyptian desires, by the way. They just sort of did it, right? On the border with Libya to assist in these Libyan rebels in their fight against the attempted government overthrow, right? So Turkey has involved themselves in a Libyan civil war. Here's some headlines, right? This one is from, I believe, 2021. Turkey sent up to 3,800 fighters to Libya. Newly aggressive Turkey forges an alliance with Libya. Okay, this is all brand new stuff. Egypt's leadership feels markedly threatened by Turkey because they just sort of entered in and took up, a location in eastern Egypt to station their troops, right? So Turkey is involving themselves in Libyan politics and Libyan warfare, right? That's A. B. Turkey is in talks with Libya over water passage rights. This is very interesting too. The claim is that the Turkish people living in Cyprus expand Turkish water rights and open a trade corridor with Libya. This is how Turkey's getting away with it. It's actually fairly smart. I'll show you what I mean, right? Here's a headline. This one's from 2019, sort of when it started. Turkey signs maritime boundary deal with Libya. Let me show you. It's very interesting. So here's the nation of Turkey, right? Now you remember how every nation gets sort of a barrier around there, maybe I don't even know how long it is, 20 miles or it could be 100 miles, I don't know. But this is their waters, their protected waters, right? Here's what Turkey said. Our continental shelf goes all the way out into the middle of the Mediterranean, right? This is Cyprus right here. So they start loading up people. Turkey starts loading up Turks in Cyprus, develops a Turkish colony, and then says, because we're partly Turkish, our water rights should extend around Syria or Cyprus and all the way down to this continental shelf, which coincidentally just happens to touch Libya's continental shelf. So now I see what they did where E and F are. They created a passageway where as long as they're in this area, according to them, and it's in dispute, they are not sending troops into international waters. Pretty clever if you think about it. They're schmoozing. They're kind of lying to get their way, but they made this claim, and as long as the claim is in the courts, they now have this corridor right here where they can ship anything they want without it entering into international waters. It's very interesting, right? That's B. So, and this is all surrounding Turkey and Libya joining together. C, Egyptian forces are threatening this Libyan and Turkish alliance. All right, here's some headlines for that. Egypt boosts their navy amid Turkish threats to the region. Egypt leads international coalition to confront Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean. This is from October of 2021. Turkey to stand by Libya in its journey for stability, according to a top Turkish official. I've got lots of these. Libya, Turkey is leading the way to reconstruction projects. So all of a sudden, Turkey is interested in Libya, right? Libya-Turkey energy deal valid despite court ruling, oil minister says. So you follow what I'm getting at? That was Exhibit 1, which was, let me go back to it. The Turkey and Libya are forming an alliance, right? So I'm going to keep giving you these. When we come back, we're going to talk about Turkish Lebanese joining forces right here. You're gonna see what Ezekiel 38 claims. You're gonna see it in real time happening right now. And it's absolutely fascinating what we're watching in this world. What God says is the very end of time is happening right now. Okay. So with that, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to mark where I am here. Let's see. Move it. It's on the bottom of 45. There we go. Okay. Just so I know where I'm at. All right. Any final questions? Anything? You need me to go back to any slides or maps or anything?
So that went a little fast.
Yes.
There's quite a bit of stuff about the Scythians and Josephus and all that that was not in the book. That's all going to be, you're going to send that all on the recording, right?
Yeah, you can get the recording. Yeah.
Okay, because that was, quite a bit in a little space.
Yeah, I didn't. That was sort of later, so I did not. Of it wasn't included in the book.
Super, super fascinating. Yeah, I'm just gonna have to go over this again just to get all that information in my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, and I sort of need to go fast. Like I told you at the beginning, I'm not as concerned with you getting every single detail as I am with you just being aware for instance, today that Ezekiel 38 is currently happening. All right. And then the rest of the research you can always do on your own. You can go on the news every day and find out some new thing from Ezekiel 38 that's happening right now. It's just fascinating. So, okay, but yes, I will send you the recording details as soon as I can. So what else? Any other thoughts or questions or anything else?
Look at said dog.
Hey, doggy. Hey, bud.
Say hi.
Say hi, Sid. He's like, you're not scratching me, so I don't want to talk to you right now. Okay. Well, good. I'm hoping that made sense. Like I said, I think it's going to get really interesting in the next couple of weeks. Obviously you can see that I get excited about this stuff because yeah, because it's happening right now. And it's just absolutely fascinating what we're watching. The time we get to live in regard to, these end time prophecies. And this is why I'm passionate about this class, because I do think we're getting very close. So, and the more you see that we lay out, the more you'll see what I mean by that. So I'm hoping that becomes clearer and clearer as time goes by. So let me
I'm
stop.
glad you said that too. Because people are saying that, oh, we won't even be around when not all that happens, but I think it's happening now too.
Yeah, a lot of it's happening. Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
What gets me is, I was raised where the rapture was going to happen long before anything happened.
Right.
But then I've been studying a lot of FAI. I've been listening to them, and they're up in the Golan Heights, and I see things really different now. And even if I'm wrong, I'd rather be prepared to spend time in some tough stuff. And so it really breaks my heart when you hear these pastors who say, oh, you don't have to worry about that. We'll be long gone,
Oh my gosh, Tammy.
Even if that's
Don't get
true,
him started.
right?
Don't even get me started.
But
I mean,
even if that were
yeah.
to be a true statement, wouldn't you want to teach your children if it happened in their life?
Right.
I mean, it irritates me because they're not preparing people for what
Right.
may come.
Preach it.
Yeah, let me get on my
Preach
soapbox.
it. Get on your soapbox, Tammy. This is exactly why I'm doing these classes, Tammy.
Mhm.
Because
It scares me, David, above anything else. It scares me because people are going to be sitting around and they're not going to know what's happening because they won't have taken the time to understand that this matters to us right now.
Right. And that we need to prepare.
Absolutely. And then how do you prepare, right? First, you got to read, know what's going to happen to know what to prepare for.
Know what's coming down the pike.
Right.
See it coming. No, for instance, if we should happen to see the beginning of that 7-year agreement, we know how much time we got. We know what's
3.5 years of water and food.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I do actually. I have a bunch of water and food stored up here. Dwayne, you probably do too. Yeah. I mean, that's just generally good idea anyway. But
you guys have earthquakes there.
Yeah, exactly.
And floods, and our houses get surrounded by water.
We do it for that reason more than anything, just because we could get stranded out here or whatever, we don't know.
We've been doing it because of power outages. So we have a little bit, but not enough for 3.5 years.
No, I know.
One of my biggest fears is what about the bank collapses and stuff?
Right.
What do you do with all your money? You can't buy stuff, right? That's the part that really scares me, because I can prepare food and water. I don't know what to do with the money, because if the money's not worth anything, what's it going to do, right?
Yeah, but you know what?
There's a mark that's going to be it'll take care of that.
There you go. Wayne, stop it. Dwayne, you're a bad influence.
What did he say?
He said, just take the mark and it won't be a problem.
I
Do
thought
not
that's what he
take the
said.
mark.
Don't take the mark.
Do not
won't
take
have
the
it.
mark.
No.
There are two instances in scripture where it says you cannot be saved if you do these things. One is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. The second is taking the mark. You take the mark, there is no turning back. You don't get saved.
These people who say, oh my gosh, is this the mark or is that the mark? you will know that
You
you
will
are,
know when it's the mark.
because it
Yeah.
will specifically say, take this mark, honor him, feed, eat, whatever.
Right.
We will know.
Right.
It's not going to be, oh, oopsies, I got the vaccine, you
Yeah.
know?
We're going to do a lot on the mark later on, just to overview what it is, what it isn't, all that kind of
Right.
stuff. But yeah, do not take the mark, Dwayne. Stop it.
Yeah, Dwayne.
Bad Dwayne.
You're gonna get
So are
wet.
we meeting next Wednesday, as scheduled?
So we're
Okay.
on for the future as no days off
Okay.
moving forward.
Yay,
Yeah.
And how many weeks
Okay.
does this go?
10.
Well, it's designed for 10. I'm going to stop recording. Hold on.